Hello and welcome. This time not for the podcast, but the AI Newsroom. I'm not sure if we keep the name, but let's go for that for now. Svetlana, would you love to give us an intro on what's happening in this video?
Yeah. Packed episodes full of news. This time around, as Edgar mentioned, we'd like to try a few new things just to keep you up on trend with what's happening in the world and basically our hot take on this. So one of the things that, as a preview, what we'll talk about today is how AI is taking over jobs. And we'll cover some stats and some interesting things of how it's actually starting to shape up in the industry or across the world today. We'll talk about Microsoft and OpenAI presenting Stargate Supercomputer. I think Edgar specifically is really excited to talk about that one. So we'll hear more on his hot take, Grok 1.5, and what that means to the market. And I think, again, as a preview, Edgar did suggest a few weeks ago that, hey, there's a reason for why they've released, or their previous version Grok is open source, and so we'll give you some of our perspective on that. Or maybe he had an insider's view. We don't know. Maybe he'll tell us all at the same time.
Musk is calling me every day and crying.
So we'll talk about Anthropic and Amazon investing $2.7 billion into kind of their new models. So again, I think Edgar has some insider and practical kind of insight into what that's all about and the impact on the industry.
Really interesting. Yeah.
And last but not least is DBRX, which is the new open source model by Databricks. So without further ado, let's dive into what's happening in the job market and why is AI taking over jobs, or where is it taking it from?
Yeah. So, thanks for the introduction. So, first of all, I'd love to share my screen on this one and just show you the article so you know that we don't make the stuff up as we go.
Because we typically do.
Yeah. Like a lot of the episodes we do, we just make stuff up. So, the IPPR, which stands for the Institute for Public Policy Research, which is an UK-based organization, and they try to shed some light on how AI will impact the job market. And they basically said we will lose up to 8 million UK careers, or will be are at risk of the job apocalypse, which I think they have a population of 60 million or so in the UK. So 8 million, it's
pretty significant.
8 million of the working population. That's a lot.
Yeah. There's another survey, and I'm actually looking at the printout of it because I highlighted the heck out of it, by Oliver Wyman. It stated that 60% of white-collar worker, and this is global stats, say they fear their roles will become redundant or automated. So, and this is just fear-based, but this is actually projections that are grounded.
I think rightfully so. I tell this basically every time when I get into a heated discussion about AI is think about all the stuff, a lot of so-called bullshit jobs we have, accounting stuff and just basically overpaid historians, right? Writing down stuff that a company or whatever entity does, and that's. Or how many lawyers out there, they just make basic stuff, just a lot of it, suing people and grabbing some cash here, some cash there, and that's all stuff that's gonna be pretty quickly erased by AI. And these are people, and that's what's interesting to me. That's are high income earners. It's also stated at some point in the article that they think the high income earners will be affected in phase 2, but and 8 million is their worst case scenario. But still, phase one is the current one we're in, and they have a phase two where they say, okay, then we can, worst case, reach up to 8 million jobs lost. And I say this a lot, like if you have high income people right now, this are people, they have like a living standard. They also have with high income jobs, they oftentimes have like high income debt for their houses and stuff like that, or just the way of living. And these people lose their job in the global sense overnight. That's an issue. Think about all the right-wing stuff happening with low-income class people just being overlooked by the government. And now think of all the people that are right now like in a better position in the society, and then going to lose their job overnight and at least need like 2 or 3 years to get into another profession. That will be interesting times.
But I think that there's been a lot of signals and indicators that, hey, this is coming. This has been a hot topic for people to really evaluate kind of some of their jobs and kind of prepare for the future. So I've heard also that, again, this analysis, you could dive into more stats on Oliver Wyman that he does. And he states that, or this group states that the lower tier jobs, so you have kind of the workers who tend to perform these repetitive tasks, a lot of their tasks will become automated. But as there's a responsibility both on the worker and the employer to anticipate those changes. And so what most likely is going to start to happen, and it's going to be gradual maybe from the beginning, where you're going to start to see more of your kind of, again, in that lower tier kind of workers looking to pick up more tasks from the next tier, which tends to be the managerial layer. And then the managers will be able to free up their time, and then it's going to climb up the value ladder. And so at some point, that's going to, again, happen gradually, but at some point you'll have to kind of face the change and rethink the whole organizational structure. So I think, again, none of these changes I anticipate happening abrupt. Some of them are, where we're seeing kind of a lot of these jobs being eliminated all at once. But as a result, some of the other things do have to change, especially if you're in markets or industries where high touch points with clients is needed. So customer service and, kind of legal, as you mentioned, maybe less so accounting, but things that are facing customers and customer service is really important. Higher tiered support is going to be valued much more. So you want to make sure that you're kind of anticipating those changes.
And also like if you look at higher tier support right now, you basically have at any company you ever call, like they have maybe a good first response, but if you go deeper, like it takes forever. So there is already right now a lack of resources. If you could upskill people, might do it. But I also think that the reskilling process is something we're pretty badly prepared for right now. And that's what's getting me worried a bit, because and it only has to destroy one election cycle and like get one wrong party at the wrong table. So we'll see. But I found it interesting that we now have like official institutes like also finding the same patterns and fearing the same stuff. Today, like, work with your mind is better paid than work with your hands. But also people say like, then like a lot more people go into blue collar jobs and then this was better, because like getting someone to fix something at anywhere in your house is basically impossible right now. Like at least in Germany, I don't know how it's in the US, but we're really like having to plan in advance for a month to get something done. It's ridiculous. But people always say like, even Sam Altman at one point posted like he's looking forward to the day where a programmer only gets 1/10 of what a plumber gets, and I'm not sure that's correct estimation, because we have now white collar people. They don't do blue collar jobs because they are not able to, but like the white collar jobs they can't were just better paid. And
Yeah.
these people now get into the market and have to reskill, and a lot of them will also go ahead and go into blue collar jobs, and then supply and demand. The supply will outgrow the demand by some margin, I guess. And then also their prices for the blue collar jobs will also fall down. So we lose the white collar jobs, and the pricing of the blue collar jobs is going down as well. But yeah, there's also like a lot of economic stuff that I'm honestly not the right man for estimating. But at least that's how I understand the market, and yeah. So man,
And I'm
that's
just
why we led
curious.
with that story, because like I think it's really an interesting part, and will make the next decade from now really interesting. I think after the decade things will have leveled out. But we will have these crucial parts where we have a shift where technology is far too fast developing compared to what our governments and people do.
And I'm just curious, just to ask before we transition to maybe our next topic, a question for the audience is, have you experienced yourself kind of these fears in your job, of your job being automated, and what's your experience been like? And if you're on the leadership side, how are you kind of translating, or how are you communicating maybe to your teams? Are there existing efforts in the organization to upskill workers? Is this something that you guys are considering in your organization? I'm just curious, what are your kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah.
Microsoft, OpenAI, they still plan to take over the world, kind of. So yeah, 100 billion data center. I'm still, it's like, is it? I think by myself, like, is it a lot in today's like trillions are invested? But even if trillions are invested, like 100 billion is a high mark, I guess.
It is, yeah.
So it's a data center project. It should it's set to launch at 2028. Yeah, we are basically seeing Microsoft betting on hardware a bit more. It's also what I see right now. Like, people a lot more tend to focus on stuff like tokens per minute, and also cost efficiency and stuff like that. Because it's, for example, something my brother always says, like, AI at the current state is not practical for like mass usage and for scale, because it's just so expensive to do inference, and also energy intensive, like thinking about climate change and stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely something to look out for. Even like the NVIDIA GPUs getting in more efficient, they still take a lot of power. So we talked about setting some of the new NVIDIA servers in my home somewhere, but yeah, like I wouldn't even be able to supply it with power, because that's how much power they need. Like, my house wouldn't be capable of doing that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. And
What this nicely aligns with also, and maybe is this kind of like the secret evil plan of Sam Altman that you've kind of heard about, him trying to pursue AGI. So is this kind of like the groundwork for some of that AGI to come to life? I mean,
definitely. If you invest 100 billion, like that's a big, huge data center. Maybe it's not even one. So if you see like the new Blackwell chip, B200, I think 200. Is it like the actual one? Because I usually like the highest scale things are the 100 thing, but like NVIDIA's naming, like I completely out of that. So it's priced between 30,000 and 40,000.
Yeah.
So if you think about like 100 billion, there are a lot of chips going into that.
Yes.
And I also always ask myself, like, we have now 2024. How do they plan that stuff ahead? Because like by 2028, the current chips will be like basically not good anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, and Microsoft also announced they have their own chip developed right now. And will it be a combination of both? So yeah, a lot of interesting questions here. I would love. I think it's just a rumor yet, or is it officially announced already? Oh, this site is awful. So is it a rumor? Because I think
Microsoft chips, you mean?
no, the chips they already showed on the like. But is the actual data center, is it all official or is it a rumor yet?
Oh, have they selected a location? Well,
artificial intelligence supercomputer called Stargate. Okay, OpenAI did not immediately respond to Reuters' request, so it's still not. I think we have still some details in the wind to be taken
like
from
announced.
that. Yeah. So it's not officially announced. But yeah, it's a big project. I think like if you cannot get like what was it, 6 trillion or so?
Yeah.
for this AGI project.
You got to start
maybe
somewhere.
that's the closest he got to it. I think but I think that's a serious amount of compute. I'm also interested because like right now also a lot of investment goes into companies that are building data centers basically with GPUs and doing inference and stuff. Really interesting development there. I think it's also crucial that this development happens, and 2024 will be basically like the best year yet in AI. Like every next year will be, but having a company like Grok with a Q in the end. I now tried it finally to use their stuff and also compared it to how inference locally works on my computer, stuff like that. We might show it next week. I might prepare a quick demo. That's definitely something to be taken seriously because speed makes for new use cases, and also cost makes for new use cases. Maybe like we get to the Anthropic part, and then I'll share some insights which I gathered this week. Interesting to see all the hardware development, data centers. That's basically also why a lot of regions are not supported yet, because there's just not enough compute. And that's why also Microsoft right now in Azure, you can do everything in Azure, like deploy your own OpenAI models and stuff like that. But you still have to make a formal request at Microsoft to set this stuff up.
Yeah.
So it's not plug and play. So they still have to monitor the inflow of new customers.
Yeah, it's a hot field right now. So, tell us more about your kind of predictions of what Elon had in store and why he.
Yeah, it was like this week's episode. We talked about Grok 1.0 being released.
Yes.
And Grok 1.0 being open sourced, I was like, yeah, maybe it's just outdated, and we get the new one, and basically like 5 days later they were like, yeah, we have it.
We have a new one.
Let's go. What do we see? I think a lot of the same stuff, right? We have 128k tokens, which might be like the new de facto standard, which you have to deliver on. I think Gemini, the new version, is also at 128. They test now the million stuff, and they will release it soon, as far as I understood. But yeah, it's still interesting. I'm still a big fan of the high context, like the big context windows, especially combined with stuff that Claude 3 now are introduced. Yeah, it's cool. Looking at the charts, I'm not sure if we can rely on the same benchmarks anymore. And also, like 8-shot. Like why? Like why is it here 8-shot, and why do we use like 0-shot on Opus and get 95? It's weird. So it's
not as consistent.
Yeah. Like use the same stuff like in the same way and then compare it. Like why do it like so complicated? I can understand that you do few-shot examples because it's just 0-shot basically for every proper task doesn't make any sense, so you have to go like step by step or tree of swords or something. So I get why they do a few shots, but they do the same for everyone.
Yeah, be consistent.
Because it's also a cost perspective, right?
Well, and I don't think that we wanted to cover this, but I just kind of wanted to toss that kind of fact in there related to the context windows. But Hey Pi or the Pi AI by Inflection, do you know what I'm talking about? That chatbot. Did you hear that they're becoming more of like a development, maybe consultancy, and no longer competing in the AI space, basically chatbot space? Because I think the main reasons is because they're not able to sustain the context windows and kind of like the pace at which some of these other chatbots are improving is just so costly, and they're just they're not able to keep up. So, and I think again, you're starting to see a lot of these like giants rise to the top and like really stay up there, and then starting to now see these smaller players really come down and down their reins and repurpose or kind of refocus their energies to development and things that they're good at. They're maybe helping other companies succeed in the space. But we're starting to see that even Elon's Grok, even though we don't have like the more one-to-one metric comparisons here to look at, I anticipate that I think he's going to be one of those main giants that are going to be competing in the space.
And he also has a lot of infrastructure built anyway for Tesla autonomous driving. I think the Dojo supercomputer is one of the fastest in terms of AI in the world. So they already have in-house resources. They don't even have to rely on Amazon or Microsoft somewhere. Like they also have their own AI chip, or is it an NVIDIA chip? I'm not sure. They have a special chip on that a special AI chip. I'm just not sure if it's like an own developed one or if it's with NVIDIA together. Like that I'm not sure about.
Through a collaboration.
Definitely. I think we also had it like with the episode with Michael, where we like basically said, will you trust a small company also? Like a big company like Microsoft with all their history has maybe also more credibility. I was on that train from day one. I was like, hey, guys, do the foundational work. I just take it and bring it to use. And that's I think where you have to go if you're not Microsoft or not Amazon. So because on the other side, Microsoft's pouring millions, and on every AI event, again and again, I go there, and Microsoft basically shows they have no idea what to do with it. And they rely on their partners, as they always did. You have to give them that, but they rely heavily on someone like doing something useful with it. So,
it's a software almost as a service, right? ML as a service, which is, again, it's a capability that is meant to be leveraged for many different use cases. So they are very much dependent on someone bringing it to life. So,
and NVIDIA even went further, and they said like, we don't even we have some foundational models, you can use it but honestly, we only want to give you the tools, and please do it on CUDA. So you have to use our hardware. So that's where they are proprietary and shut up. But there are also movements against that, so that people try to establish new open source standards. We'll see. Interesting nonetheless. Is there something else? No, it's also not as much what they told us, like 128K window, some of the infrastructure behind it, and it's now releasing to a few first early preview testers. So we'll see.
I think there's definitely more to come on that. But what I'm actually curious about, and I know you've kind of left us in anticipation for an answer, but I'm really curious what your take is on the Amazon's investment on Anthropic. They poured $2.75 billion into them.
Yeah, definitely. So generally, Anthropic was founded by an ex OpenAI employee, or some even some higher OpenAI employees, because they weren't aligned with the way
The principles.
that OpenAI developed, and they wanted to do something different. And they went ahead and they from day one, I think they had a focus on big context windows. And now with the latest developments, Google and Anthropic announced that they not only can support bigger context windows, but also make actual use of it without the usual problems which you had with big context windows. Which was all cool. So and now Anthropic, what is it, 3 weeks ago, they released the new Claude 3 model family, which consisted of 3 models. And I'll have some words on that, but just to close the news article up. So Amazon already invested in them, and they now closed another investment round, whatever, and poured some more billions into that, which I was happy to read, because Anthropic is, for me, the one competitor which is really interesting in terms of who can really challenge OpenAI and their developments. Because you don't think
it's Google? You don't think Gemini really stands up the part to...
From what my brother was teasing... without he's not allowed to tell me anything, of course, and I don't want him to, because he can lose his job. So, but at least he was wait for the next Google event. I think you are even there, right?
I'm there next month. Yep.
And I wasn't sure if he meant that, or he meant the I/O event in the summer, which they do for the developers. But he's telling he's seen stuff he was really amazed, and he's more of a skeptic usually. So he definitely gives me the feeling that Google has a lot of up his sleeve. And also, if you look at Gemini 1.5 Pro and what they showed, and it's only the Pro model, it's not even the big one. There's serious competition to come there. I was a bit underwhelmed by the performance, so I now integrated the Google multimodal vision stuff just to test it out into our app. It's 3 to 4 times slower than or it takes 3 to 4 times longer than GPT-4 Vision does, by having comparable results. I did not test other APIs, but that's the baseline.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're big on multimodality, bigger than anyone else, as far as I can tell. So that's why where I look at Google. And that's where, for example, the Claude models are not that big into all the multimodal stuff, and also the Claude app where you can use it. It's not that sophisticated, compared to ChatGPT, for example.
But let's talk about just I want to say the large language models, right? Just the text-based chatbots. I am going to venture out and say that I think Google is going to come and really make up for the kind of the time they lost, kind of watching and sitting back. And basically what has happened, and I think it's probably rubbed them the wrong way, is that here goes OpenAI working on their transformer architecture, and that they themselves developed, and then winning most of that market share. And it's probably frustrated the heck out of Google. And now they've invested, and I think we talked about even about this before starting, but even the fact that they were able to catch up, after the release of Bard and then now Gemini, to catch up to its performance, OpenAI's performance. I mean, they are the ones with a house full of researchers, people who again are transformer grade researchers who've created those types of systems. I think they could pull a few others to be able to say hey guys, can we do something to really boost the performance of something that we ourselves developed? And I do think that they'll maybe what your brother is alluding to is that I think that they do have a lot of stuff up their sleeves that they're just probably just taking their time on, because they don't want to get burned. They don't want to release something premature. They
have a lot more to lose than a small startup, in quote unquote. But
so we'll see.
One thing that Anthropic showed me again, and I talked already about performance. is how much value small, capable models have. I looked into Claude 3 Haiku, and it kind of got not that much of buzz. Like the bigger models got a lot of the spotlight, and every test basically I found was always with the biggest model, which in and of itself is really expensive. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't use it compared to GPT-4 for my production application because it's just not worth it. On the other hand, they have Haiku, which is the smallest model. It's a lot faster. It's a lot cheaper, but it still has the 128K context window, 200K context window, and they also will add the million context window to the small model.
Wow.
And the language and text understanding, for example, far outpaces what GPT 3.5 does. And also it's multimodal, which GPT 3.5 isn't. So it's a small multimodal model which is fairly capable, like really capable, for the size. And basically there is no competition in that like size class when you look at the output. And I tried some minor stuff, some like actual use cases that I need for my application, and I was kind of I was close to
switching models.
yeah. I most likely will now implement at least the option, like in the settings, to switch, because we have a lot of privacy stuff that I built in, so that everything runs on Azure and stuff like that. But for someone who doesn't want that and want just to cheap and fast do the RAG pipeline stuff, man, this is really something. I tell you that. So the image stuff, the vision stuff works really well. It's really freaking fast because it's like a small model, right? And that's something I think gets a bit overlooked, but it's really, really valuable for production-ready application. Thinking about real-time, thinking about call centers, that stuff. There is enough language understanding in that small model and enough vision understanding in that small model to do that. And I think that's really valuable. So if you build something, really have a look at the small model. It's definitely worth a look.
And I think another perspective, just maybe another idea for what it could be used for, is proof of concepts. So you don't want to be building proof of concepts that are really expensive or these big giant models for you to then inference, and it's going to cost an arm and a leg for you to run even on smaller pilot scales.
Yeah.
So maybe what these models, what the Haiku is able to produce as far as output, maybe is sufficient for what you need. So again, what you're looking for in the first round of proof of concepts is signals that it's working and it's producing what you need. And then you evaluate for accuracy, and then you fine tune it to get it to perfection.
Yeah.
But during the initial phases, probably something like Haiku is perfect.
Yeah, and like you just don't have an alternative for that context window size. 200K, you could build like really sophisticated RAG pipelines, which oftentimes you can't use small models for because you extend the context window pretty quickly. And now you're going ahead and say, oh, yeah, that's true, but we have Haiku. There's 200K context window. It can even use it properly. And now you build a RAG pipeline. You don't need a lot of creativity from the model itself, so because you want to stay close to the source material. And now you have yourself an app on hand, which not only can use the big context window, but it's also cheap and fast in doing it. I think that's something to have a look on. And like you said, like if they release some way to train it properly for my specific use case, like that's open game, right? I'm really looking forward to next week or so to look deeper into that, because I think there is a huge potential and really shows where AI can go when it becomes efficient.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing more. And did we leave the best for last? The Databricks model? Do you want to just cover that briefly and what your kind of thoughts on that model is? I think it's similar in what a lot of the other companies have been doing is converting their large language models that they've developed and poured millions in this case into, and they've just open boxed them for people to use.
Yeah, definitely. So, talking about the Databricks is a company, as far as I know, I've not that much heard not that much from them. I just know they are like in data analytics space. Like they have solutions for that. And they have for their own customers, they have AI functionality for data analytics related stuff, and they build their own model for that. And that's the model they now released, and it's open, and it's a mixture of export model. And this model is competitive with Gemini Pro. And which is basically like the middle model, I think, from Google right now. It surpasses GPT 3.5 and is like 4 times faster than 2 times faster than Llama 70B, while outperforming it. So they have some charts here. They like language understanding, which is at 73%. I think that's something where you still, like, if you have a language understanding task, you might be better off with a bigger model. But still, like, this is a local model. One of my favorite open models is Mixtral, which is also a mixture of expert models, a model. And they crush it in programming, 70 to 45%. It's huge. I'm not sure how good this runs locally, but it's open source and people will optimize it so that it can run locally. And and also one thing that's interesting is like they build it for like really analytics stuff. So, and that analytics stuff, it comes even close to GPT-4 at some points, which I found interesting. And if you look at Grok, which is a huge model, they outperform it in like at least these 3 benchmarks pretty easily. And that's open source. That's really sorry, Grok 1 is also open source. But it's also, and we like, this was kind of the tune of the episode, efficiency. Like they even put up, I think, where was it? They put up the inference time and the tokens per second. And tokens per second becomes more and more something that people are aware of and people put out there, and they can have like 150 tokens per second, which is already like fairly fast, to be honest. So really interesting, a new player in space. I found it it's worth mentioning because might be interesting for you out there if you have data analytics tasks and you want to have it like in-house. This is something to have a look at.
And I think programming in general, I think we covered it in one of the previous episodes, is programming, data analytics are one of the first, I want to say, kind of connecting it back to the first topic that we covered was jobs. But it is one of those jobs that is going to or being evaluated for automation. So those types of things types of tasks tend to be automated. And again, I know we talk about, sales, marketing, and content creation. But again, just want you to kind of bring it back to the facts that people are actually, when they've done surveys and evaluations, it's actually programming and analytics that tend to be much more repetitive, and that could actually result in significant savings for organizations. So I think this is where I think this really is really important for people to see the true impact of things like this. And they're open source too. So which means that you have access to build with this, experiment with this. You don't need, additional access to bring this even locally to experiment with. Yeah. Yes, when you can push it to production. Yeah,
you can
different.
Go now on Hugging Face, just use it. It's cool. And open weights also. So
yeah. So I know we've covered all of the topics. So just want you to kind of invite the audience to see how you like the new format, just where we focus on the news, capture some of the articles, kind of offer our perspectives and how it might matter to you from a business side. And just want you to kind of, again, drop a comment below. We really appreciate your feedback. And everyone who has engaged with us or sent us a message or dropped a comment, which, again, we are responding to and truly appreciate your time. But anything that or any ideas you want to share, drop them up in the comments below.
Yeah, and yeah, leave a like, subscribe, helps us a lot, and we are really looking forward to extend our content palette a bit. So of course also resource question, but yeah, we are pretty confident that we get to a point where we can deliver even faster, even more about what you can actually use and what can be actually valuable for you. So yeah, the news format, this episode can get kind of long. I hope we can cut it down in the future a bit. Yeah, I hope you like it. I hope you still like us as your hosts to guide you through. And we have fun as always. I can tell you that. And yeah, that's
appreciate it.
My side.
Thank you so much. Again, subscribe. It's a great point of validation for us that we're doing great, and we should be kind of trending forward and continue to go in at this space. So please consider subscribing, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.